Hi, welcome to day 5 of Anne Boleyn Week. Today I'm going to introduce you to two men who were arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London in May 1536, but released later that summer without charge. The first of those men is poet and diplomat Sir Thomas Wyatt the Elder. Wyatt was born in 1503 at Allington Castle in Kent, just a stone's throw from the Boleyn family home of Hever Castle. He was the only surviving son of Sir Henry Wyatt and Anne Skinner. Sir Henry Wyatt had been imprisoned in Richard III's reign as a Lancastrian supporter and subsequently released on Henry VII's accession. Henry Wyatt served as a privy councillor for Henry VII and was an executor of his will, and he continued his royal service when Henry VIII became king in 1509. And in 1516, his son Thomas is first mentioned as being at court, serving as a sewer extraordinary at Princess Mary's christening. Thomas was educated at the humanist St. John's College, Cambridge. In 1520, when he was 17 years of age, he married Elizabeth Brooke, daughter of Thomas Brooke, 8th Baron Cobham, and in the following year, Elizabeth gave birth to their son Thomas Wyatt the Younger, who would lead Wyatt's rebellion in 1554 against Queen Mary I. Sir Thomas Wyatt the Elder started his court career properly in 1524 at the age of 21, when he became Clerk of the King's Jewels. He was made Esquire of the Body in 1525 and then went on to become a diplomat for the King, undertaking many foreign missions, including one to France in 1526 and one to the Papal Court in Rome in 1527. In 1528 he was made High Marshal of Calais, and in 1532 he was made Commissioner of the Peace in Essex. Wyatt was also one of the men chosen to accompany the king and his sweetheart Anne Boleyn on their visit to Calais in the autumn of 1532, and he served Anne at her coronation in the summer of 1533. He was knighted in 1535. By the mid-1520s, Wyatt and his wife Elizabeth were estranged, and it is around then that he appears to have been linked romantically to Anne Boleyn, who'd returned from France in late 1521 or early 1522. Now, Wyatt had little to offer Anne. He was married, but it appears that he was infatuated with her, and that she was his muse. According to one story related in Elizabeth I's reign by George Wyatt, Thomas Wyatt's grandson, Thomas playfully snatched a jewel from Anne and kept it as a trophy, wearing it on a ribbon around his neck. One day, Wyatt was playing bowls with Henry VIII, and Henry VIII was courting Anne at the time, and the two men argued over a shot. The king pointed to the wood with the finger on which he was wearing Anne's ring and declared, "Wyatt, I tell thee it is mine." Wyatt, seeing the trophy on the king's finger, replied, "If it may like your majesty to give me leave to measure it, I hope it will be mine." He took Anne's jewel from around his neck and began to measure the cast with its ribbon. A furious Henry VIII broke up the game and went in search of Anne for an explanation. There is absolutely no evidence at all that Wyatt's love for Anne was requited. His poem, Whoso Lists to Hunt, tells of a man hunting a hind with little chance of success, and then being forced to withdraw from the hunt because of another hunter. The poem reads, "Who lists her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain. Engraven with diamonds, in letters plain, there is written, her fair neck round about, Noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame." Anne is the wild hind who is caught by Caesar the king, and poor Wyatt, the other hunter, has no chance. It surely must have been this previous link to Anne, along with Wyatt's friendship with George Boleyn, a fellow poet and diplomat, that led to Wyatt being arrested in 1536. And it was probably his father's good relationship with Cromwell that saved Wyatt. Cromwell obviously wrote to Sir Henry Wyatt to reassure him about his son's fate, as we know that Sir Henry wrote a letter of thanks in reply. Another man who appears to have been arrested around the same time as Wyatt, for they were both in the Tower by the 5th of May 1536, is Sir Richard Page. Nothing is known of Page's background and early life. All we know is that he started his career in service to Cardinal Thomas Wolsey as his chamberlain, and that in 1516 he was listed as a gentleman of the Privy Chamber, being referred to as Sir Richard Page. In the 1520s, Page served as a Justice of the Peace for the counties of Surrey and Middlesex, and in 1525 he was chosen to help administer the household of Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond and Somerset, the King's illegitimate son. In 1527, Page accompanied Wolsey to Calais, and in 1528 he was a surveyor and receiver for the ports of London and Southampton with Sir John Wallop. When Wolsey fell, Page profited, being granted manors and lands that had belonged to his former master. Page's wife was Elizabeth Stanhope, née Boucher, widow of Sir Edward Stanhope and mother of Anne Stanhope, the future Duchess of Somerset. Page was Elizabeth's fourth husband, and the couple had a daughter, Elizabeth, who married Sir William Skipwith. Page was a close friend of Queen Anne, carrying out sundry little services for her and being rewarded for doing so. This closeness to the Queen, combined with his rivalry with Sir Nicholas Carew, a Seymour supporter in the Privy Chamber, may have been responsible for his arrest in 1536. However, Page had good relationships with influential men like Sir John Russell and Sir William Fitzwilliam, which probably saved him from an untimely death in 1536. Neither Page nor Wyatt were mentioned in the indictments drawn up by the grand juries of Middlesex or Kent, and they were not tried with Weston, Norris, Brereton and Smeaton on the 12th of May. In a letter written on the 12th of May to Lord Lisle, John Hussey wrote, "Mr. Page and Mr. Wyatt are in the Tower, but it's thought without danger of life," although he changed his mind in his next letter to Lord Lisle on the 13th of May, saying, "This day some say young Weston shall scape, and some that none shall die but the Queen and her brother, others that Wyatt and Mr. Page are as like to suffer as the others." It must have been a time of uncertainty and real fear for Wyatt and Page. They remained in prison for some weeks, probably being released in June 1536. Page's experience in 1536 does seem to have put him off royal service. He wrote to Lady Lisle saying, "He has not greatly essayed to be a daily courtier again." However, it wasn't for long, as he's recorded as accompanying the king on a journey to do with the Pilgrimage of Grace rebellion. He went on to serve as a sheriff, as lieutenant of the gentlemen pensioners, and as chamberlain to Prince Edward's household at Hampton Court. He died in 1548. Sir Thomas Wyatt continued in service to the king. He was made steward of Conisbrough Castle during the Pilgrimage of Grace rebellion and was asked to provide 200 men for the king's side. He also served as Sheriff of Kent and in 1537 carried out a diplomatic mission to Emperor Charles V's court, although it was an unsuccessful one. In 1541, Wyatt got into trouble again. He was charged with treason for making rude comments about the king and dealing with Cardinal Reginald Pole. Wyatt was thrown in the Tower of London, and this time he had no father to secure his release, for his father had died in November 1536. Wyatt's saviour this time was Queen Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife, who interceded for him, securing his pardon and release. Of course, she could only have done that if it was what the king actually wanted. But in return, Wyatt had to agree to return to his estranged wife. In 1542, Wyatt was back in favour and had been restored to his office of ambassador. However, this return to favour was short-lived because Wyatt was taken ill after receiving the Emperor's envoy at Falmouth. He died on the 11th of October 1542 at Clifton Maybank House, the home of his friend Sir John Wolsey in Sherborne, Dorset. Another man is also mentioned as being questioned in 1536. Sir Francis Bryan, a courtier known as the Vicar of Hell, and a man who was related to both Anne Boleyn and her successor Jane Seymour. In 1538, Robert Hobbs, Abbot of Woburn, wrote that at the fall of Queen Anne, Mr. Bryan was sent for by the Lord Privy Seal in all haste upon his allegiance, but that Bryan had told him there was nothing found in him. Alison Weir, in her book Henry VIII, King and Court, writes that his interrogation may have been a charade to lend credibility to the other arrests, since Bryan was unquestionably Anne's enemy, and in fact profited from the fall of her co-accused. Bryan had previously distanced himself from the Boleyns and allied himself with the Seymours, so perhaps it was that saved him. He was soon back in favour, if in fact he'd ever been out of favour. And he was the courtier chosen to tell Jane Seymour the news of Anne Boleyn's execution on the 19th of May 1536. He was also made Chief Gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber. Those three were very lucky, weren't they? But Wyatt and Page lost friends that spring, and Wyatt's poetry about the executions is haunting. Circa regna tonat, around the throne the thunder rolls. Today is, of course, the anniversary of the men's executions, so I'll share a link to my video on that terrible day. I'll be back tomorrow to give you a potted history of Anne Boleyn, and I'll be going live here on YouTube tomorrow at 10:30 p.m. UK time, 5:30 p.m. New York time, to answer your questions on Anne Boleyn and her fall. See you then.